Hey, I'm Dr. McCleary, and in this video, I'm going to give you my top 5 PTSD myths. And this list might be a little bit different than other people's lists because I'm going to give it to you from a veteran's perspective. So each one of these myths I've either heard while I was in the military or from a veteran after I got out. But we haven't met before. Hey, I'm Dr. Harry McCleary. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and Navy veteran, and I spend the majority of my week treating active duty service members with PTSD. My first PTSD myth is one that we probably all heard before, and that is PTSD is just made up. It's not really a thing. Wrong. PTSD is definitely a thing. And although we haven't always recognized PTSD as a thing, it has definitely probably always been a thing, and it has probably existed since there were people and since the first trauma happened, which is probably when the first people existed. The second myth that I want to debunk is do you have to be in combat in order to have PTSD? Wrong. And I've heard this many ways. I've heard not only did you have to be in combat, or you can't just be in a forward combat area, that doesn't count. Or just being around combat doesn't count. You need to be in a firefight, or your convoy had to have been ambushed, or IED had to hit somebody on your convoy, or a combination of those last two things in order to have PTSD. That's just not true. Traumas happen not just in combat, but outside of combat. And that has been evidence me seeing multiple people that have multiple combat deployments and had PTSD. However, their PTSD didn't actually come from combat. The next myth that I want to go over is, well, I must have PTSD because I've been to combat, or I must have PTSD because I had a trauma in my life. Having a trauma or going to combat does not equal having PTSD. Sure, a part of a PTSD diagnosis is experiencing a trauma. However, just having a trauma does not equal PTSD. And contrary to that myth, most people that experience a trauma do not actually develop PTSD. Stay tuned to the end of the video, or just fast forward to the end of the video, and I'm going to give you my most frustrating myth about PTSD. So my next myth is having PTSD makes you weak, or people that have PTSD are weak. Also, not true. And I know a lot of very strong individuals that have PTSD that'll punch you in the face for even saying that. PTSD does not make you weak. Doesn't necessarily make you strong either. We don't fully understand why some people develop PTSD and why some people don't. But what we do know is that being weak is not a criteria or a precursor for developing PTSD. Number 5, I think about my trauma a lot, so that means I must have PTSD. This one is actually a little bit more tricky, because thinking about your trauma a lot, thinking about your trauma to the point where it is intruding on your everyday activities or is somehow impeding your functioning, this may be a symptom of PTSD. However, just thinking about your trauma, even if it is a symptom of PTSD, one symptom does not make a PTSD diagnosis. And along with that, thinking about your trauma may not be necessarily a bad thing. Part of treatment is actually going to be a lot of thinking about and talking about your trauma. And if you think that something so important and so horrific and so eye-opening that you'll never think about it again, I'm afraid that's probably not going to happen. This is an important and powerful memory that's going to stick out to you. And are you going to think about it every once in a while? Yeah. When you think about it, is it going to affect your mood? Yeah, probably. Most likely, you're never going to go and think about your trauma and say, yeah, that was an okay time. That's just not a thing. Nobody, even if you grow from your trauma, you don't say, yeah, man, back when I was in Iraq, I really learned about that convoy when we lost all those guys in that ambush. You know, I wish that could happen a couple other times. You know who says that? Nobody. Thinking about your trauma does not equal PTSD. Thanks for staying with me or fast forwarding to the end. So my bonus myth, if I want to call it that, is PTSD lasts forever and basically can't be treated. What? Really? That's not true. Now, it can feel like that sometimes with somebody that has PTSD and has been suffering for a long time. However, there are multiple great and very effective treatments for PTSD. Treatment does work. And some psychologists might disagree with me when I say this, but you can have PTSD and then not have PTSD. Because PTSD, like any other diagnosis, is a set of symptoms to a certain level. When you no longer meet that level, or you don't have those symptoms at all, guess what? You no longer have PTSD. May some psychologists say, oh, well, they're PTSD in remission. Okay, fine. Say whatever you want, whatever label that you want to put on that. However, PTSD can be treated to the point that it doesn't affect your life anymore. And saying that PTSD lasts forever or PTSD can't be treated is more than a myth. It's a lie. Something to think about. As always, if this video was helpful for you, please share it with someone else. Please share it with another veteran. Sure, subscribe to my page if you want to learn more about PTSD, or click the like button if you enjoyed this video. But more important than that, sharing this video with another veteran that may believe some of these myths or has heard these myths over and over again, just like I have, may be extremely helpful. So I would want you to share this video before you like it or subscribe to my page. Because at the end of the day, that's what all of this is really about. One veteran trying to help another.